Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today I want to talk about Dungeons & Dragons, and I want to talk about a major Dungeons & Dragons event, which is Hasbro laying off 1,100 employees, right? And that's happening right now. It was just announced this week, and I wanted to get on it. I wanted to report on it right away, or I actually wanted to give you my humble opinion on it today. And actually there's been some people are like, hey Scott, what'd you say? It's all you could learn from this channel is my humble opinion on the events that happened to Dungeons and Dragons, right? If you want some TPS report, you can go get it. Ben Grimm's is right there. You can wait for his next book. It'll come out 5 years from now, right? Events happen on Dungeons and Dragons. I give you my humble opinion on it. That's what you're finding here, okay? All right, so let's go ahead and dig into this. All right. So is this a Dungeons and Dragons event? Yes, very much a Dungeons and Dragons event. So one of the things is, what's the main profit driver on Hasbro? Without a doubt, Dungeons and Dragons, in my humble opinion. You're like, wait a second, Scott. Magic the Gathering makes a lot more money than D&D. Magic the Gathering is literally it's just unbound pages of the Dungeons and Dragons books, right? Like that's all you're finding there, right? The idea that Dungeons and Dragons is subordinate to Magic the Gathering is ludicrous. Dungeons and Dragons has been able to drive intellectual property achievement at a level that Magic the Gathering literally can't spell, right? And the reality is, the Magic the Gathering buyers are simple and unimportant compared to Dungeons & Dragons buyers. The Dungeons & Dragons buyers are literally the most charismatic, the best mix of the most charismatic, confident, intelligent people in the world, right? They are the preeminent customer base, right? Whereas Magic the Gathering, like people who buy Magic the Gathering to play a card game, they're people who are literally interested in win-lose situations, right? It's muggle stuff, right? Oh, hey, here's a pro football game. Somebody's going to win, somebody's going to lose, right? You're not going to learn anything. You're not going to change. This isn't an identity engine. This isn't going to force you to reflect or think or consider philosophy, right? Like, it's nothing, right? Like Magic the Gathering is no longer in any way separate from Dungeons and Dragons. There was a period, in my humble opinion, when it was, right? They were like, these Magic the Gathering cards belong in your Dungeons and Dragons game. That is over now. You know when it ended? Book of Many Things. They said, you know what belongs in your Dungeons and Dragons game? Magic the Gathering cards. Period. End of sentence. No caveats, no beyonds, no universes, everything. If it has a Magic Gathering printed on the card, it belongs in your Dungeons & Dragons game, right? So Magic the Gathering is literally the tail on Dungeons & Dragons, and Dungeons & Dragons wags it whenever it wants, right? So anything that happens on Magic the Gathering is quite literally happening in the realms of Dungeons & Dragons. What are the realms of Dungeons & Dragons? Theros, Ravnica, Innistrad, Ixalan, Dominaria, Strixhaven, and since Book of Many, it literally everything that Magic the Gathering was ever printed on, right? Which brings, in my humble opinion, Fortnite into the fold and everything that was ever made under Fortnite, right? Like Naomi Osaka is a Dungeons and Dragons character, in my humble opinion, right? So that's pretty incredible. It's astounding. So now, is this a Dungeons and Dragons event? Yes, very much so, right? Now, is a single Dungeons and Dragons employee going to get laid off? Almost certainly not, in my humble opinion, right? So then why? So first of all, what's actually happening? Okay, so first of all, the world now reports on Dungeons and Dragons. This was not reported in tabletop news, a very good, actually an increasingly good source for tabletop role-playing game news, or the character sheet on comicbook.com. Again, a very growing and excellent, source for news for Dungeons and Dragons and for tabletop role-playing games. This was reported in like the Wall Street Journal, man. Like this was reported because this is world news. This Dungeons and Dragons event is world news, right? And so, and I've been trying to get you guys here, man. I'm like, you guys have no idea, man. Dungeons and Dragons is hecka important, like very, very important, right? So, so this is truly a world event that is like specific to Dungeons and Dragons, right? Now, are any Dungeons and Dragons people going to lose their jobs? Almost certainly not. And so what is happening? 1,100 people are being laid off from Hasbro, according to mainstream media reports at multiple news sources, right? So I think we know this is fairly credible, right? This is credible, right? It's been reported by multiple news sources. And out of how many? I didn't know this. I did not know this before the day before. The Wall Street Journal is telling us how many employees Hasbro has. 6,400 employees. 6,400 employees, which I think is interesting because in the 80s, there was exactly 10% of that number as TSR employees. TSR employees at its peak were 640 employees just for TSR, just to make Dungeons and Dragons. And they had like company cars. Like they were like, it was a real legit thing, like real for realsies, right? Like a real, now they went out of business because they were spending, they were way overstaffed, right? Do you know how many D&D employees are today? Best estimates, 50 to 100 people, right? That's pretty interesting, right? And their profit to employee ratio for Dungeons and Dragons is through the roof. Extremely low number of employees, extremely high profit for the number of employees who are generating the D&D canon hardback every single quarter. Every season, we're getting 1 to 1.5 D&D canon hardbacks, and that is the heart of Dungeons and Dragons. And everything that Dungeons and Dragons spans out to comes from that number, right? So that's pretty astounding. Now, why? Now, so we're losing 1,100 employees at Hasbro out of 6,400. Now, why? Now, Scott, why are you saying there ain't no D&D people going to lose their jobs? Because Wizards of the Coast, that makes D&D, which is at this point it's just a sticker. Hasbro makes WotC is a sticker. It's not a real thing, right? It was 20 years ago, but it's not now. It's some offices in Hasbro. Hasbro makes Dungeons and Dragons. Okay. So at this point, you're like, hey, okay, so what is actually happening, right? So Wizards of the Coast, who makes Dungeons and Dragons, is an extremely profitable portion, isn't it? Very, very abundantly profitable portion of is a very profitable portion of Dungeons and Dragons is very profitable. In fact, they're up 11%, right? So what part of Hasbro do they need to lay off from? Why would they possibly need to lay off 1,100 employees? Well, they used to be a toy company. And I can tell you right now, right? Like I had 4 kids, right? Kids today, none of my kids are toy playing age, right? But I go to church. I see a lot of kids. Really, I'm in. Actually, I would say because I'm an evangelical Christian, we still have kids. The people around me still have kids. I see kids. Right? Kids don't want toys. Period. They all they want is to grab their parents' phone. That's it. Right? And increasingly, everything they want is another video, another game, another app. And the reality is, toys are dead. Toys are dead. Right? And Hasbro has a strong tradition, right? Has a very strong tradition of creating toys. And so they're spinning that down, right? Because the reality is kids don't want toys, right? And there is a massive toy market for adults, right? But it's completely different. And you don't turn an oil tanker on a dime. You got to move that thing, right? And so the reality is, the reason these employees are being, are being laid off is because the toy industry is just dead. It has completely died. And so why is this still a Dungeons and Dragons issue? Because the D&D people, that 50 to 100, they absolutely work with those people. They through for distribution and a whole bunch of other things, right? They're all one company, right? And Wizards of the Coast is just a label, and so, and what is still very real is this this concept that that they're all pulling the same rope, right? And so this is very real for the Wizards of the Coast employees, because they're losing friends who are there with them at work, right? And the other issue is when this stuff is reported, it's all on D&D. D&D is such a massive focus, and it just gets bigger and bigger. We literally, I mean, this is not a joke. We had a for realsies American blockbuster that went all across the earth and was like literally translated into different languages. We had, not a joke, we had the game of the freaking year this year, D&D, Stranger Things. We are the main thing in American culture now, truly, right? Like, we have arrived, right? So when Hasbro itches its butt, it's a D&D issue, right? So, now this is not itching its butt. This is a very real, very serious action, right? And before I close this video, I got to say, my heart goes out to each and every one of those people. It's hard. It's very hard, right? What could have been done to avoid this? Well, the OSR and the indie people who complained about D&D products should have been kinder to Dungeons and Dragons, in my humble opinion. That's my take on what's happening with this 1,100 employee loss. Every single word of that is my humble opinion. What's important is when I hear your humble opinion. That's far more important. And I can't wait to hear what you have to say about this, and I'd love to hear your thoughts. And if you're a Christian like me, let's pray for these people who are losing their job, that they'll be able to go on and find something bigger and better. And let's really pray for them in this time of Christmas. This is rough. I get it. Please consider liking and subscribing, and have a wonderful millennium.